Right guys, so today we're going to be doing a Lexus SC430, 2001 to 2005, going into a USA IS300 02 to 05, running a manual gearbox. So let's do this. Right, so as I said, this is going to be a Lexus SC430 going into an IS300, both USA models in this particular case, and the customer is using a CD009 Nissan manual gearbox. So what we're going to do today is we are going to go first of all through the entire layout of the harness. We're going to go through each and every section, showing the customers exactly where everything is connected to on this particular harness. Once we've done that, we're then going to go into the testing, which is as usual made up of two parts, one with just the ignition on and one with the engine actually running. Now, before we jump into the layout, what I'm going to do is we've got the pictures of where we go through the whole process of doing this particular harness. As you can see, it is an adapted existing harness. So we've taken his original SC430 3UZ harness, we've completely stripped it down, fixed anything that needed fixing, added in what we needed to add in. So let's cut to those pictures now and you can see exactly the process that we go through. Rightio, so as you can see there, everything gets stripped down, cleaned, replaced what needs replacing, and we add in what we need to add in over there as well. Okay, so let's jump into the layout of the harness, starting right here at the ECU box. Now, obviously, this is my IS200 cutout, so obviously I've got to change it between an IS200 and an IS300. So these are all these little adapter harnesses that you can see there. What I'm going to do now is cut to a photograph of what this would look like in the customer's car. Right, fantastic. So there, you should see exactly what it would actually look like inside your vehicle, in this case, the customer's vehicle. So please do excuse a little bit of a mess here. It's only a mess because I'm converting from an IS200 to an IS300. Right, so looking at the ECU box, now obviously in the customer's case, this ECU is going to slot straight into his box, so we don't need to worry about anything about that at all. But on the ECU, we've only got 5 connectors. It's really, really simple. We've got 3 in a cluster over there. We've got a gap over there, and then we've got 2 body plugs over there. Now, obviously, we do have wires running from the body plugs into the harness, hence why we have this little patch harness here. So that's going to interface with the customer's existing 2 connectors on here that should remain in his vehicle once he's removed his 2JZ engine. On the body side, we have 4 plugs in total. We have that one over there. So looking down into here, it would plug in there, there, and he's going to have an extra plug there, which I don't on the IS200. Now, what you will notice is that basically, even though his was originally an IS300 Auto, we have actually taken the speed sensor wise that you would find on the American IS300 manual to there, because again, we don't want to limit you guys to be able to sell this harness onto somebody who had an IS300 manual. So all the wiring to put it into an IS300 manual is there, as well as an IS300 Auto. Okay. Right, so we've got 4 body plugs there. We've got 5 ECU plugs there, and obviously you connect your existing ones into there. Really nice and simple. Down here, we have a couple of junction connectors over there. They just slot in here where this blue one would be and that one over there, which you saw in the original picture. You would have seen those 2 slotted right in over there. Okay. Moving along, you have your grommet, which obviously slides down into there in your particular case on your vehicle. Obviously, we've got the engine quite high up, so we can't do that in this particular case. But moving along there, the harness comes along here, and then we get to our first sort of plastic section that holds it all together. So this one has a bolt here and a bolt there. So really, really nice and simple, nothing major to get done there. First section that pops out is going to be over here, and that's going to go to injector 1 and coil 1. So while I'm here, just so that you know where each cylinder is, looking at the back of the engine or from the back of the engine, this is the left-hand side closest to me, and that is the right-hand side, okay? The left-hand side has cylinder 1, 3, 5, and 7. The right-hand side has cylinder 2, 4, 6, and 8, okay? So those are the cylinder numbers, and that is how you do it. You always look from the back of the engine, or I say from the driver's perspective. Okay, so again, this is popping out here, and it goes to injector 1 and coil 1. Super simple. Moving along there, we have the second breakout section over here. First thing that pops out is going to be our oil control valve for our left bank. A little bit further along, then it breaks out there, and it goes to our TPS connector for our throttle body over there. Moving along down over here, then it's going to break out about here and go to the front cam sensor. Now remember, the 3UZs have 3 cam sensors. They have one on each inlet cam, and they have one at the front, which the engine uses for synchronization of engine position. Moving along down to here now, you're going to see we've got little marks there and there where the harness can clip onto to keep it out of the way. That's fine. Right at the top here, it's going to break out into 3 sections for you guys. So the easiest one to get to here is the aircon plug. Okay, so that's going to plug into your aircon pump that's right over there. Now remember, this is an SC430, so again, super simple and straightforward. If this was originally an LS430, you would have had actually 2 plugs for the aircon pump, and to make it work in these cases, you need to swap out for either an SC430 01 to 05, a GS430 2000 to 2005, or even the 1UZ VVT-i. They have the same plug on there. Those aircon pumps will work with the swap. In this case, and the customer's got an SC430 engine, so again, this will plug straight in. Everything will be fine. The next section that pops out over here is going to pop down through there. Hopefully you can see they go make their way down there. Remember, your aircon pump's going to be here. You can get these wires down here with the aircon pump on. I've done it plenty of times. But if you want to make your life easier while if the engine's still out, then obviously you can remove the aircon pump and then push those wires through there. Now, in this particular case, you're going to see our engine is an LS430 engine, so we have the oil filter housing that wouldn't work for an IS200/300 swap. So in this case, the customer's oil filter housing is going to be facing that direction over there. And that is why the thinner section that breaks out there is going all the way down here to the oil pressure switch. Now, in the customer's case, he can either bring it over here, take it down to there, he can bring it through there, pop it out the back there, and then go around to there. Either way will work, no problem at all. Then the next section that pops through over there is going to pop down through there, and it's going to go to the crank sensor over there. Okay, all different plugs, so you can't really get it mixed up, but it's just nice to be able to see what you're looking at, because usually if these are in the car, can't really see all of this. It's all sort of tucked away behind the radiator. So that's this front section over here. Really, really nice and super simple, nothing too complicated there at all. Now, moving back over to here, we then have the harness go through there. There's a small section here where it sort of pops out and goes into there, makes its way to our second piece of plastic. And again, that's bolted down there and there. So really, really super simple. Okay. Now let's focus on what is going on over here. So in this first section that breaks out over here, we have got 4 sections in total. Now, as you'll see with our European ones, we don't put this on because it's just for the EVAP system. As in California, you guys have very strict rules. With all our American harnesses, we do leave this stuff in. Most of that stuff can be mapped out of the ECU, and if that's the case with your particular setup, you can just tuck this out of the way, no problems whatsoever. Okay. Next up down here, we then have injector 3 and we have coil 3. Super simple and straightforward. And over here, we have the cam sensor for the left bank. So that plugs in directly over there. Moving along to the next section now. And again, here we have 3 bits that pop out over here. We have injector 5 and coil 5. Again, nice and simple. We then have the noise filter, which is little gray things that are bolted to your inlet manifold there. And you do plug those in over there. Okay. Moving along to the back here now, we then have this section that breaks out there, and that goes to injector 7 and coil 7. So again, super simple. The way that they break it out kind of dictates where they all plug in. So really, really nice, simple, straightforward. Hopefully it doesn't cause you any issues. Moving along down the back here, the harness is going to bend over the fuel pulsation damper, not regulator. And then it's going to pop into the back piece of plastic over here. Now this has 2 sections where it bolts down, and hopefully you can see I've got a bolt in there. And there's a bolt over there. So that's the only 2 bolts that hold this piece of plastic section in place. Okay. Now, moving along down here, you'll see the first section where it pops out is going to be down here. Now, this is originally where all the automatic gearbox stuff came out. Obviously, it's a little bit less now because we removed all of that. But the section that pops out there first is going to be your earth ring, okay? So that ground, sorry, earth, same thing. Now there's an M6 bolt there, so on your 3UZs, this is the bolt that you should have. This M8 and this M8 will not have any bolts in on a 3UZ. This is used for the 1UZ VVT-i, this is used for the 3UZ. So again, this bolt should be in your engine. Hopefully you put it back as soon as you took the harness off, but bolt that straight down in there. It's a little ring terminal, nothing fancy over there. The next section that pops out down here that remains of the original harness is going to be going down to the Lambda sensor, which you can see just over there. Now, remember guys, there's a metal shield. You can see that little bolt hole there and up here. There's a metal shield that goes there, and that's designed to protect the connector from the exhaust. So please make sure you do put that back in again. As you can imagine, this exhaust dangling around, this connector dangling around, if it touches your exhaust, it's going to melt very, very quickly, and you are not going to have a good time. If it does, because obviously there's powers and grounds in there, they will then join together, short out, blow a fuse, and your engine's not going to run very well. Okay, so just remember, that metal shield, please put it back there. Right, so now we have the two sections that we've added in over here. Now, as this is going to be an American car, this is going to be a left-hand drive, so we've got our pedal connector that pops out over here to a 6-pin DTM connector, which then pops along there, and the customer has already bought his pedal and sent it with his harness, but that is his pedal that's going into his IS300. Next up, you'll see there's a much thinner section over there that goes along, and that is going to be our gearbox harness. So it's a 4-pin DTM plug because, as I said, we have actually taken two wires for the speed sensor to there. They're only applicable for the manual IS300 02 to 05. This customer has, I think, originally an auto, if I'm not mistaken. But either way, they will work no problem whatsoever. Right? But in this case, because this was originally an auto, we don't need a speed signal because the speed signal comes from the ABS and a VSC ECU. So we've just got two wires coming out of here, and it's going to our CD009 reverse switch, which is at the back of the gearbox over there. So again, really nice, super simple. And if he ever was to change the gearbox, we can actually pull that out and give him another sub harness for whatever gearbox that he's using. And like I said, if he ever was to sell this engine harness or whatever to someone who originally had a manual IS300, they could fit the speed sensor from an R154 or W58. We can make them a harness that goes to those two connectors, and because we've added all the wires in there, it'll work in a manual IS300 as well. So you're not limited on whether you want to sell this to a particular person. You can sell it to either an auto or a manual IS300 owner. Okay, right, moving along to there, you'll see we have this plug at the back of the harness. Now in this case, the customer didn't send us this sub harness that goes underneath, but what I'm going to do is I've got some stock footage from other harnesses. I'm going to show you what it looks like underneath there. But as you can see now, it goes down to the starter motor, to knock 1, to knock 2. Right, so there you go, that's it. And that plugs directly in there, and that pops over from over there. Down here, you're going to see our big thick cable, and this is for the main power for the starter motor. Now on 3UZ, you will notice that there's a little section that pops up this direction, and there's a little section that pops in that direction. Now that's the differentiation between a left and a right-hand drive. Left-hand drive vehicles, your battery's over there. So of course, that's why that pops in that direction, because this thick cable would be facing that direction. It would move along there and connect to the positive of the battery over there, okay? But they made the same for both left and right-hand drive, and that's why this section is up here, because the harness the wire would come up here and then plug into the positive of the battery on this side over here on a right-hand drive vehicle. All right, super simple. Let's move over to the other side now and carry on from there. Right, so you've done all of that. Moving along here, and you're going to notice there's a little section that pops out over here, and that's going to be your second earth or ground connection over there. Again, you've got your M10 bolt over there. Your M8 would not be there. This would be for a 1UZ VVT-i, so on a 3UZ, you're only going to have that bolt over there. Nice little ring terminal, bolts onto there. Super simple, nothing complicated there. Moving along to the front here, we're then going to have the two breakout right here, which is going to be injector 8 and coil 8. Remember, this is 2, 4, 6, and 8 on this side. So that's over there. It's going to move a little bit forward over there, and then we're going to have 3 sections that break out. This one is going to be to your ACIS valve, or acoustic control induction system valve. Obviously, that runs underneath your intake to a vacuum solenoid that's there. Now, I do advise, if at all possible, because normally the customers who send us the harness, they have to take the intake off to put the harness back on again. It's always a good time to check your vacuum solenoid valve that it is working. Now, if you look at these wires over here, there's a thick white one and a thin blue with a white tracer. Thick white is 12 volts, blue with a white tracer, that is the ground that comes from the ECU. So if you want to, before you plug this in, you can connect 12 volts to the black, a ground to the white, and listen for that click of the vacuum solenoid valve. If you do not hear that click, then it's time to take the intake off and replace that solenoid, because if that system doesn't work, the ACIS system, which we'll go through in the testing over there, you lose a lot of low down torque. Not a little, a lot of low down torque. Okay, so please make sure you do check that before you put everything back together. Okay, so that's that section over there. We've got injector 6, coil 6, and the ACIS that pop out over there. So that's going to be there. Moving further along there, and again, because it's American, we have a couple of extra sections that pop out over here. But we're going to have the cam sensor for the right bank. We're going to have injector 4. We're going to have coil 4. Now, we're also going to have the noise filter on this side over here. So that's going to plug into the little gray thing that's bolted to your inlet manifold there. They basically look like this. That's what they look like. And then because it's an American model with your emissions, you've got this plug over here, which plugs into a valve that goes into the air box over there. So again, that's a USA only one. You wouldn't get that on a Japanese or a European model. Again, we are leaving this in so that you guys are not restricted, because if you do have to give it to a guy in California, they need all of these emissions equipment to be there and working. So as I said, these can be mapped out of the ECU, but if this customer ever wanted to sell it to someone in California, they would have to have all of this working so they could redo the ECU to make sure that is correct, but they still have everything connected in there, okay? And again, if you're not using it, you can just tuck it out of the way there. No harm, no foul. It's not going to do anything major there. Moving along from there, we're then going to break out, and just so you can see, there's basically a bolt there and a bolt hole there, so you can use P-clamps like we have there. Obviously, I like to keep the harness loose because I've got to test all the stuff here, but this is just to show you kind of what you could do. Use a P-clamp to hold it all on there. But moving along there, then we have quite a few sections breaking out over here, so let's go through them all. So first of all, you can see this section that pops out over here. That's going to your throttle body over there, and that's your drive-by-wire motor. Then we have your coolant temperature sensor, so that plugs directly into there. We then have your oil control valve over there. We've got injector 2, we've got coil 2, and then lastly, popping up over here, we then have the mass airflow sensor. So that's all that pops out over there. Okay, so it is quite a few things, but again, all different connectors, so you can't really get it wrong. Just got to make sure that you can put it in the right place. Okay. Then moving down along there, the harness comes down to here, and then it breaks up down here by the alternator. With the alternator, 3-pin plug over there. And then we've got the oil level sensor. So remember, because it's an IS300 swap, he's not going to have this sump from an LS430. He's going to have the front sump. And that's why we move, or in this case, you don't have to, but obviously with the LS430, we would move this section. And this is the oil level sensor that plugs into there. And then lastly, in the back here, you can see I've got the Lambda sensor over there. Right, okay, so that goes down through there. So remember, guys, on the 3UZ, unlike the 1UZ VVT-i, they actually have 2 different sensors. This one has a much longer harness section, and the other one is a shorter harness section. And before you think you can just go buy 2 of the long ones and fit them both, that is not correct. They have different wiring. So if I had to put the short one on this side, not that it would reach, but if I did, you'd get an error for a Lambda sensor on that one, and vice versa. If I try to put the long one on the other side, you're going to get an error for the Lambda sensor over there. So please make sure you get the correct ones for that. Down in the description, I put a list of a bunch of parts with all the part numbers on all the things that you guys would need. Things like servicing kits, timing belts, tensioners, spark plugs, injector seals and grommets. All of that stuff is down in the description. So if you want those part numbers, please check down there as well. Okay, so in terms of what the customer's going to fit on his side, obviously he needs to connect his main alternator cable, which is this positive one over here. As it's a left-hand drive vehicle, it's a nice short run. It's just going to run straight from here. And he's going to have a fuse box over here, like I do over there. And you can see there where I've bolted it on right there. That's where your alternator bolts onto, and then it gets fused by your car's alternator fuse, which is 120 amp. Right, so that's basically the only thing the customer's going to add on. His harness should already be in place for here, so he's going to plug that straight in there. He's going to take his power cable from the starter motor directly to the battery, and he's going to run the main alternator cable directly from there along the chassis up, and then bolt onto the fuse box exactly like you see there. So that's pretty much all the extra wiring that has to happen on the customer side. Everything else is plug and play. Now, in this particular case, there is one thing that we have added that the customer wanted, and we might do it for all the USA ones. We'll have to wait and see. But effectively, the 3UZ normally has 2 Lambda sensors after the catalytic converters, the secondary Lambda sensors. They don't affect the way the vehicle runs, but obviously they're emissions related. So in this particular case, what we've done is, because the IS300 has the 1 Lambda sensor that comes out down there, I'm not sure on the left-hand drive, maybe the other side. Anyway, it comes down there and it went sort of halfway down the car in the exhaust there. What we've technically done now is we've connected that one sensor to both sensor outputs on the ECU. So in other words, the customer doesn't have to fit another Lambda sensor in. He's just going to fit that one Lambda sensor that's already in his car into the exhaust, and it's going to satisfy both of those signals. I think in this particular case, there was a particular reason why he needed that. I'm not 100% sure, but as again, we normally map those out, but maybe he does need them in for some reason. So we have left them in and we have wired it in over there. Okay. Right, so that is the entire layout of the harness. Hopefully that's really, really straightforward and simple. Remember, it just makes a U shape. That's all you need to know, really. Pops down on there, everything plugs in. They pretty much have different plugs for everything, and the way the harness is designed as standard kind of dictates where everything goes. So when you come and look at these sections over here, you've got boom, boom, boom. So clearly all your injectors and coils would be on separate ones over there. Okay. Right, so now we've done the layout. What we're going to do now is I'm going to go get everything set up. We're going to come back and then we're going to start doing the testing. So, see you in a second. Right, guys, so we are back now and we're going to be doing the testing. So as I said, it's going to be made up of two sections, one with just the ignition on and one with the engine actually running. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all the tests that we're going to carry out. Then we're going to jump into the testing with just the ignition on. Okay, so when I said I'm getting everything ready, obviously you can see I've moved the airbox down. I've connected up the PCV system. I have actually done a video on that. So I'll put again down in the description, there'll be a link to that video on how it's important to connect the PCV systems and issues you might suffer if that's not connected correctly. So again, I do advise you guys to go and watch that. The more information you know, the better it is and the smoother install you guys will have. Right, so moving along here, let's look at what we're going to be testing with just the ignition on. So first thing we're doing is the ambient temperature. Outside temperature, whatever you want to call it. We're basically going to come over here and make sure that we're getting a reading on the outside temp dash. It is actually being sensed by the ECU, so the figure you see there is correct. Obviously, this is a European vehicle. It's going to be in degrees Celsius. If you're America, it'll be Fahrenheit for you. Next up, we're going to come back to the dash and we're going to check the check engine light, the charge light, and the oil pressure light. So we want to make sure that all of those are working. So check engine light's popping up there. We'll have battery light there and we'll have oil light there. All we want to see is make sure they go on. When we come to start the vehicle, we want to make sure they go off. Okay. Then what we're going to do is we're going to test the reverse switch. So basically all I'm going to do, you can see the wires already there. I'm just going to bridge that over there. And that's the reason I'm using my IS200 clocks, because they have that annoying buzzer for the reverse. So when I connect that over there, I know that the whole circuit all the way from there inside the vehicle is correct, connected correctly. And if I get a buzz from there, that means if you plug that into your CD009 gearbox and you put it in reverse, you will get your reverse lights popping up. All right. Speedo in this case, we're not going to be testing because obviously we haven't got a speed sensor. In this case, the customer's speed is coming from his ABS VSC ECU. OBD2 test, basically what I mean there is making sure that the OBD2 machine is actually talking to the vehicle. So as you can see on here, sorry about that. As you can see on here, I have got the OBD2 machine just connected to the standard internal plug. Right. So the way we've done it with the plug and play, because of the use the same system between the 3UZ 5-speed and the IS200/300, we can utilize the standard OBD2 port. So nothing changes there. You would plug in a diagnostic machine exactly like you would before you did the swap on your IS300 or 200 for that matter. All right, then we're going to test the fuel pump relay. Now in the description below, I have a video on how the fuel pump systems work. There are a few different variations. In this particular case with the SC430, it uses a fuel pump relay and it uses a second fuel pump relay. So in this particular case, that system is connected exactly as it should be. So on your IS300, you might see it over there. There's a little resistor over there. So basically what's happening is the fuel supply, the 12-volt supply, is going to run through a resistor when the pump doesn't need to run very fast, okay, or at 12 volts. So it'll step down the voltage to run the pump slower, and it'll do that when the ECU sees fit, okay. Now, there's obviously other variations, like on the GS, you have a fuel pump ECU. Same with like the Supra and so on. And then also on like the IS200, you don't have that fuel pump resistor. You've just got the one circuit opening relay, which is technically a fuel pump relay. But if you want a much better description with diagrams, go watch that video. I go into great detail about exactly how all of those systems work. So that's the fuel pump. Then what we're going to be testing is the AC clutch. So we'll use our machine over here. We'll test the output. We're going to listen for the AC magnetic clutch relay clicking over there to make sure that the ECU is controlling that correctly. Then we're going to come back and we're going to make sure that on the machine here, that when we press the AC button, our AC request signal is also received and goes from off to on. So remember, the AC system will work on this, but it does require the entire system to be plumbed in correctly and all the sensors working. So again, it senses pressure. It has a lock sensor in the AC compressor itself. So there's a bunch of things that need to be there, that need to be working, it needs to be gassed up, but it will work. And that's what we're testing over there. We're making sure that the MPX data that has been remapped to suit the IS300 is communicating from the car to the ECU. Okay. Then next up, we're going to be testing the brake switch. So again, all I'm basically going to be doing is I've got a wire over there, STP, which is brake switch. I'm going to give it 12 volts. We're going to come back over here and make sure it goes from off to on. We're going to unplug it, come back here, make sure it goes back to off again. Super nice and simple. Now, moving to the engine running, starter circuit, well, it's exactly what it sounds like. Effectively, I am going to put the key into the ignition. I'm going to turn it and start it. And that means that everything in the body plugs over there is wired correctly, and therefore the vehicle will start when you turn the key. That's obviously part of the plug and play section. Next up is the ACIS valve. So as I said earlier, the acoustic control induction system or variable intake runner length, again, video of how it works down below. We're looking for this valve to move like that, and it does it a few seconds after the car starts. Okay, so that's what we're looking for as part of that test. Drive-by-wire test, well, couldn't be simpler. Basically, I'm just going to press the pedal, make sure it works. It's a 3UZ, it's a full drive-by-wire system. There's absolutely no cable, unlike the 1UZ VVT-i that had a cable but was still drive-by-wire. But anyway, so as soon as I press that pedal, the engine should rev. If it does, I'm super happy with that. Next up is the oil control valve VVT-i test. So actually what I'm going to do is, there's a test in TechStream. It's like a little TechStream handheld device. But basically it's going to advance and retard the cam. So when I do it, the engine's going to sound really lumpy. What that tells me is that the oil control valves are doing what they're supposed to. Okay, nice and simple. Next up is injectors and coils. So again, straightforward, I'm going to unplug each injector one by one. So these injectors aren't actually clipped in, they're just resting on there. So I'm going to pull them out one by one, and you're going to hear the engine misfire as I go along cylinder by cylinder. That's going to tell me that every single cylinder is firing exactly as we would expect it to. The reason I don't remove the coils is because on a 3UZ, if you didn't know, once the coil sends a signal via the IGF or ignition feedback to the ECU to tell it that that cylinder is misfiring, it shuts off the injector until you turn off the car and restart it again. So as you can imagine, if I unplug the injectors, ignition coils one by one, it would just kill each cylinder until eventually it couldn't run anymore. So unplug the injectors. As soon as I plug them back in, the engine goes back to running smooth. And that's why I unplugged the injectors on that test. Next up is going to be the tacho signal, rev counter signal, whatever you want to call it. So basically with these 3UZs, because the tacho signal coming from the standard ECU is actually a 4-cylinder signal, we have this little box, which I don't think I mentioned actually, silly me in the other one, but it's this little box over here, and this is converting a 4-cylinder to a 6-cylinder. It is adjustable. I use my machine and the dash that we have over there to calibrate it here, but again, it is adjustable, so if it gets to your side, you can make slight adjustments if you would like to. Okay. Coolant temp, that's one of the important ones. That's one of the remapping of the MPX changes, because the coolant temperature normally doesn't work, so we're going to make sure the coolant temperature works as part of that test over there. And then lastly, we're going to go over to the diagnostics machine. So because the ECU has been remapped, we should basically have absolutely no codes on here at all, okay? And that's effectively what we are looking for. All right, so that's all the tests that we're going to do. Let's jump into the test with the ignition on. So to get going, I'm just going to take my key, put it in the ignition as the plug and play harness, and turn the ignition on. Really simple and straightforward. So first off, we said we're going to go over to the ambient temperature, and there it is, a nice chilly 13 degrees Celsius in the workshop today, but we do have that figure over there, which is exactly what we're looking for. Moving over to the dash, you can see we've got our check engine light, our battery light, and our oil pressure light over there. Now do remember, guys, the TRC, VSC, or whatever light does need to come out of your cluster, because that system will not work between the 3UZ and the IS300. The low oil level sensor, I don't have the bulb in here because I test many like non-VVT-Is that don't have that particular setup. But yeah, all of that should work, but it's just the TRC bulb that you need to remove from the cluster. So please do remember that as part of your install. Right, so we've gone through that. Let's go over and let's test our reverse switch over here. So again, I'm going to replicate exactly what your gearbox does, which is effectively join the two wires in this plug together via a switch. So let's do that now. And you can hear that annoying beep over there. And that makes me happy, because that means all the wiring from the reverse switch all the way into the vehicle is 100%. Okay. So again, if you want to test it on the vehicle before you plug it in, get a piece of wire, bridge them together, look at the back of the car, you should see the reverse lights on. Right, so again, we're going to miss the speedo because we don't need to test that one. OBD2 test, let's just pop over here. Just going to swap hands a second here. Flick on OK. And you can see that I have simplified the data down. It normally gives a whole load of data, but the communication rate is very slow, so it's painful if you have all that data on there. But you can see we've got coolant temp, which is 32 degrees. I've got the AC signal stoplight switch because that's what we're going to be testing later. But yeah, we have communication via the OBD2 port. And as I said, it is plugged into the bog standard IS200/300 OBD2 port. Remember, left-hand drive, it's going to be on that side. But it's the bog standard one. There's no extra plug to plug into. You plug in is exactly like you would if it was a standard IS300. Right, so moving along now, we're going to test the fuel pump relay. So let's do that now. So I'm just going to pop into the active test over there. And again, you'll see fuel pump relay and fuel pump. If you watch that video about fuel pumps down there, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about there. And we're just going to go into fuel pump for our particular purposes now. And let's pop over and hit that on. And you can actually hear the fuel pump down there working. And there I've turned it off. So again, super happy with that. So that is the fuel pump relay. Let's go ahead and test the AC clutch. Pop back over here, go into active test. We'll then go into AC magnetic clutch relay. Pop into there. And let's turn that on. Right, now hopefully the microphone is going to pick that up. But I'll move the camera over there because there, in that little fuse box over there, that's where the AC magnetic clutch relay is. Fantastic. So I'm super happy. That means the ECU can control the AC magnetic clutch relay, which means it can work the AC system. So let's get the second part of that AC test, which is our AC request. So basically all I'm going to do is pop over here. I'm going to flick that button over there. And as I do, you're going to see the AC signal has gone from off to on. Pop over here, turn it off, and you see the AC signal has gone from on to off, which is exactly what I wanted to see. All right, last test over here is going to be the brake switch. So as you can see here, our stoplight switch currently says off. Let me go give that 12 volts quickly. If you give me a second. That's a bit difficult single-handedly. We'll get there. Right, so now we've got our stoplight switch showing on. Let's go pull that wire off. That's what she said. And stoplight switch has gone to off. Fantastic, super happy with that. That means everything is wired correctly as it should be. And just remember guys, with the IS200s and that, you do actually have two wires from the brake switch. They're both wired correctly on this one, because otherwise if the other one wasn't, we'd get an error code for a stoplight switch issue, which we won't have on here. You'll see in a second. So yeah, both signals are wired up correctly. Everything is 100%. Right, so what I'm going to do now is, as you can see, we're about 31 degrees. Not ideal for the coolant temperature. It only starts reading about 40. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pop off. I'm going to let the engine run for a little bit, pop back, and then we will jump straight into the engine running testing. So see you in a second. Right, guys, so we are back. I've let it warm up a little bit, so you can see we're on about 53 degrees Celsius. Coolant temperature gauge has started to lift off the needle there, which is exactly what I wanted. So quick recap, because it's been a while since we went through it. But firstly, we're going to test the starter circuit. That's just simply turning the key, making sure it turns on. We're going to pop over here, test, make sure this valve goes down. So we'll move the camera and make sure that has happened. We're then going to pop over and rev the engine with the pedal, make sure the drive-by-wire is working. We're going to pop back over here, test both oil control valves. Then I'm going to move over and start unplugging each injector one by one to make sure all the cylinders are firing. We'll pop back, make sure the tacho is working. And then we will make sure that the coolant temp has gone up, because obviously the engine would have been running for a while by then. And then we'll go through the diagnostics, make sure we haven't got any codes there. So let's jump into it. I'm going to get my ear defenders on and let's fire her up. So 3, 2, 1. Fantastic. Okay, so that's all good. The valve has gone down, so that's all good. Let's pop over and give her a bit of a rev on the pedal here. So let's test the oil control valves quickly. So we're going to go back into active test. We're going to pop down here and we're going to go VVT-i VVT-i control bank 1. Okay, so that's bank 1. Let's go ahead and do bank 2. Fantastic. Okay, so exit that quickly. Right, so now then, let's go in and test the injectors. So let's start here at number 8. Number 6. Number 4. Number 2. That one, 3. Right. Let's pop over to this side here. Let's go ahead and do number 1. Okay, let's go over to number 3, number 5, let's go over to number 7. Rightio, so that means all the injectors, the cylinders are firing exactly as they should. Awesome. Look at our tacho, we're just under 1,000, and that looks about right to me, so that's perfect. Coolant temp has gone slightly up because you can see we're about 65 degrees right now. And what I'll do quickly is while we're here, let's go into DTC. You can see we've got no check engine light on, so that's all gravy. And you can see under current, we've got 0 codes at all. Okay, I'm gonna quickly turn it off. Turn it back on again. And get rid of my ear defenders quickly. Show them on the toolbox. Right, so that is perfect. Couldn't ask for anything better. Everything runs exactly as I would expect it to. Every single cylinder is firing. Drive-by-wire works, tacho works, coolant works, all of the check engine lights work. You can see the oil light and the battery light went off as soon as we started the vehicle. Same with the check engine light. And obviously because of the remap, we have 0 codes for the engine at all. Okay, now some of you might be saying, well, Chris, you haven't connected the NOx sensors in there, so why haven't you got a code for that? Well, this is a unique thing about the NOx sensors. They won't give you a code unless you push the engine or it goes under load and it doesn't detect the signal, okay? So basically the ECU looks like at this stage is not looking for any type of signal from the NOx sensor when it's at idle or low load. So basically what you guys need to do is if you want to get a code for a NOx sensor, you're going to have to basically in a safe, legal environment, obviously, you're going to then have to just get in the car and give it a boot. And then what you should see is if you've got a problem with the NOx sensor, that code will appear, okay? All right. And so that's absolutely fine. So again, couldn't be happier with that. Now on to diagnostics. Bearing in mind, guys, in the USA, you guys cannot do the bridging of the 2 terminals to get the check engine light to flash the codes out. Not sure why they did it in the USA, but it stems all the way back from the one you said VVT-i. So you will need a diagnostic machine, okay? This will plug into your existing one, which I've already said a million times, but you can plug anything in, get it to read, get all the codes off of there, okay? So if you do get a check engine light, which you shouldn't, as you can see here when it's running, I got no check engine light. So if one does come on, there is a problem. You're going to need to plug it in and you're going to need to see what the issue is, okay? There's no point in guessing. Get a machine, it'll tell you exactly what code is coming up. It'll tell you exactly what the issue is, and then you can fix that issue, okay? So again, I've got a diagnostics video. It's actually on a 1UZ non-VVT-i where we do the whole bridging of the terminal and get the check engine light. But I go through a couple of things that I normally do when I do diagnostics. Things like I would always check the codes and note them all down because the ECU will store codes. So sometimes when you get to your machine and you plug it in, you have a bunch of codes. They may have been codes from ages ago. The ECU has a permanent 12-volt supply, so as long as the battery's not disconnected, obviously it'll retain codes and all that type of information. So I always start by checking the machine, noting down all the codes and what they are. I will then clear all the codes. I will start the car and try and replicate the issue and see what codes come back, okay? So it can be sometimes a little bit frightening. You get in there, you see about 7 codes and you're like, oh, what the hell's going on? Note them all down because some of them might be relevant, but then clear them, start the car, take it for a drive. You may have to do it once or twice for 5 to 10 minutes each time to replicate the issue. Come back, see what the codes are, and that should hopefully point in the direction of what the issue is. Okay. So again, hopefully this video has been super helpful for this particular customer, Greg. We got to get this off. We got to get it back to him in America, because I know he said his engine's already in the car, so he is waiting. We'll get this back to America so he can get his swap done. And again, if there's any questions, Greg, please feel free to send us a message. Hopefully I've gone through everything here for you, so you shouldn't have too many questions, but if you do, please feel free to fire us a question. For everybody else, if you have any questions about this particular setup, if you want pricing for this particular setup, again, there are differences between the 3UZ. So please make sure, guys, when you are asking for a quote, if you're telling me you've got a 1UZ, well, congratulations. There's probably about, I don't know, 20 types of 1UZ. And same with the 3UZ, there's 3 variations are just LS, GS, and SC. And then even in those variations, you have a split halfway through where they changed over to another type of 3UZ. Again, so if you guys are asking for quotes to save a lot of time and going backwards and forwards, if you guys have a photograph of the ECU showing the part number, fantastic. That gives me all the information that I could possibly need. Do be careful with you guys in the USA. I've come across it once or twice where you get 5-speed engines and 6-speed ECUs. So again, I have a video on how many different types of 3UZs there are, what visual indications to look at, things like the throttle body and so on, to determine whether you have a 5-speed or a 6-speed. And obviously then you can take a look at the ECU part number. You can go on Toyo DIY, put that part number in there, and it'll tell you exactly what you're working with. So again, if you ever end up in the situation, which I have seen before, where you end up with a 6-speed ECU and a 5-speed engine, you can check that before you pick up the engine and make sure you're getting the correct ECU for the engine that you are buying. Okay, but again, if you guys have any other questions, please let me know. It's a simple case of I don't know what you don't know. If you guys have any things you do want me to discuss, put it down in the comments, and next time we do a video with that same engine harness on, we will then go ahead and try and do a video answering that particular question. But as usual, thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Never break, always fight, never quit, do it right, play the game, win it life, have no shame, there's no time, feel the pain, live the grind, I could change, in my mind, pick a lane, commit and climb, the only way to win it life. I never miss, that's fact, taking big swings, put your hand to the bat, put me in the ring, you'll go out in a bag, cause I sing what I mean and I bring it to the mad light. Ain't got time to kill, I got time to feel, I took a red pill, I know life's short so I wanna live real, but I was exposed